Okay.
Hopefully we're live. I don't know. We might have a little technical glitch there, but at the very least, we're going to be on a replay. So I do want to welcome you to the Day of Light and Love, and I'm Jeanne Fritch, and I am here present as the event host. It is totally exciting to be a part of an event that is a collaboration from just a wave of light bringers, and Shanti Zimmerman, who is our contributor that we're talking to right now. She definitely brings light and love, like in everything that she does. The thing I love about Shanti is she brings all of herself. She's just present. And I hope that we're going to hear from her. But one of the reasons why we're doing this event is this is a time of year that a lot of people will notice what I call a gap. Shanti was just mentioning it to me as a longing, which I really do like that. I think that's a beautiful way to say it. It's just that there's a sense about maybe your life as you presently are, that you feel like you want it to be greater or more vibrant than it is. Or maybe you feel even more so like there's a void and you don't want to end 2018 in the same place. So we're here to help bring light and love through these contributors. And I am excited that Shanti's here. Now, she is in Switzerland, and I'm in the Chicago area, so we're on two very different time zones right now. But, you know, that's the beauty of the internet. We can be anywhere at any time, you know. So, Shanti, you are, I love that your business is Being Shanti. I think that's amazing. And when I asked you, you know, how do you define what you do? And you said emotional alchemy. Mm-hmm. I thought that was a pretty interesting way to phrase it. Can you maybe introduce yourself a little bit to the people that are watching? Some will know you, maybe some have never heard of you before, and you guys are in for a treat. So, you know, really just share a little bit about maybe your background and your path to getting where you are today.
Okay. Oh, wow. All of it? So I think I can speak to a little bit about how Being Shanti came to be Being Shanti. I went through a Tony Robbins training, and I've lost you guys. Just 1 second. Maybe it's better if I don't see us. Coaching training. I've been through many different continuing education trainings, marketing trainings, coaching trainings, a part of many different aspects. And there was always something that wasn't there. I always felt like, okay, wait, there's something that it could go deeper, right? There was something that was for me that felt like it was missing. And then it came to needing to market myself in some way. And that was a very long market. I always say that marketing was one of my spiritual journeys, because it's like the spiritual awakening of like, how do I want? What do I want? How do I want? How do I speak to people? You know, because a lot of marketing is about manipulating. It's about getting people convinced that they need something. And that was never something that really jived with me, although I've tried it, I've done it, I understand that aspect of it. And then it came to, well, I really just, what do I bring to my sessions with my clients the most? And that is myself. And everything that, you know, all my training, all my life experiences, all of that, it shows up to this moment right now. And so it was very, in that moment, I'm like, well, Being Shanti makes sense to me, because that's all I have to be. That's all I have to be. And yes, I have all these, you know, credentials, which I burned in a bonfire, by the way. So I don't even have them to prove them to anything. But that's not what I bring. I don't bring a piece of paper. I don't bring like a distillation of an education. I bring myself and all of myself and as much presence as I am in this moment. And so that made sense to me to do Being Shanti, which also gave me the freedom to teach whatever I want. And what I want to teach is that emotions are magic. That they're not these evil, you know, churches, religion, systems, schools. Emotions are those things that are always like left out last, or they're told that these are what make you unstable, or don't let your emotions run your life, or all of these things. And it's been a very deep, in my experience, very deep misunderstanding. because emotions are actually some of the clearest signals that we get through our bodies about what we need to do for ourselves sovereignly, like as individual human beings with our lives. And so many people push that knowing and that sovereignty away because, emotions aren't worth your time. So that's what I've been working with people for years on emotional alchemy, and under the idea that emotions, once we feel them, become rocket fuel. If we push them away, if we deny them, if we act like they're not there, we lose a piece of what we are vibrantly as a human being.
Yes. You mentioned in a conversation that we had that emotions are your first language.
Yes.
And that emotions help people accept, that you help people accept and own their emotions.
Mm-hmm. Their own direct experience of their emotions. So not what somebody else is telling them their emotions should be or should feel like or shouldn't, but like, what am I actually feeling? What am I actually having here? Because what I've noticed for myself is before we ever speak language, I have 4 kids as well. So before we ever speak, we emote. So emotions is actually, the language of emotions is actually everybody's first language. It's how we communicate before we have words to say what we need. And if you're paying attention to a child, it's very clear without language what they need and want. It's not, that's not rocket science. It's like you just watch a child and you can, even without language, you can know what it is they need or what direction they're pointing for, do they need a hug? Do they need to be fed? Do they need to be changed? It's something that we communicate with very, very early on. We forget that that's how it is, but that is how it is.
Well, you mentioned about parenting, and I was going to get to that later, but since you brought it up, you believe in parenting in the now, not in the was. I think that's a very powerful statement.
Yeah.
Can you?
Sure. So if we're going to talk about emotions, I learned what I teach by becoming, first healing myself in many ways, but in all my healing process, I healed through having children. That's really my whole path. And so watching them and their emotions, like for example, they would cry and have a total fit over something that of course my adult mind is like, this is stupid and this is not rational and blah, blah, blah. But then like they would get up and run down the street and play. Not like it would be, okay, and running down the street. There was no break of like, oh man, I'm such a bad kid because I had that temper tantrum. Why did I have that temper tantrum? Oh, I shouldn't have had that. I should feel really bad about myself. There was none of that. It was just from one emotion to the next without a judgment placed upon the emotional experience. It was just like, I'm sad and that's it. And there's no story about it. And it was really refreshing. And I remember thinking, well, if they can do that, then I can do that. Right. So, and they go from one thing to the next. They're not sitting on what happened yesterday or what happened 10 minutes ago. They're not analyzing it or trying to figure out their way out of it. They just full on, like with everything they are, they feel everything and then they move on. And so that was the first level. And then parenting the now was something that like, when it came to starting to have to discipline or what people, punishment things, I began to realize that my children would do something and there would erupt like a story about who they were then. Well, now they're a stealer, they're a liar, they're a this, right? Oh. And I'm like, and that would be like a veil that would, some kind of like sticky, like peanut buttery thing that would be between me and my child. And I was like, that can't be. Like that they may have stolen, they may have lied, but that is not who or what they are. And that moment that they lied or stole is over. So it always, or like, you walk in and one bit the other and it's quite obvious. There's like this huge biting mark and you're like, okay, so you bit her. So what do we do now? Became the way I began to parent instead of you did this and you sit in the corner and you blah, blah, which was, my learning, my conditioning came from that space. So it was always the first reaction. And then I had to like pull that reaction back and be like, okay, well, that's not going to get us anywhere. It's definitely not going to create a relationship of trust or of really looking, like my kids can look at their behavior and decide if they want to keep it or not. Right? Like, oh, okay, yeah, that's maybe not who or how I want to be, instead of like me telling them who they need to be.
Absolutely. You're letting them own their own emotions.
Right.
That's really cool. You mentioned to me that you help people to trust themselves.
Yeah.
And I see that with the way that you parent your children as well.
Yeah, well, or like, for example, they'll fall down and they'll have a scrape or whatever, and we have a kit, you know, with all the Band-Aids, everything. And I sit down on the floor with them and I put the kit on the floor. I'm like, okay, this is how you do it. You know, I trust you. Just that they learn to care for themselves while being supported, but not having it done for them.
Yes.
Because other things that I think are really important, like all my kids know how to cook. They all know how to clean a toilet. And not from like, I'm the parent and you have to do this, but it's always like we approach it as we live together. We're 6 people in a house and we live together. So we need to all be contributing in some way. And it's really interesting when I step out of the way, like we set up certain things in certain ways and the kids will do that for a little bit and they'll look like this isn't working. And then they'll shift, right? And they'll shift it in a way that works better. Like these 2 are better at this and these 2 are better at this. So they split into those groups by themselves.
You allow their leadership to come in.
What I find when I'm working with, I would say 99% of my clients is this deep lack. They don't trust themselves.
Yeah.
They don't trust their own decisions. They don't trust their own experience because they've been told, like we get told often from everywhere how we should feel, what we should experience. We even get told what we want, what we should desire in life.
Yes.
You know, like the whole go to school, go to college, get a house, get married, have kids.
Cookie
like,
cutter. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And they come out and life has this way of like kind of shaking that all loose. And then they're like, whoa, I don't know who I am. Like, how do I trust myself? And if there's one life skill I think every human on the planet can use, it's trusting themselves. And it is a life skill because we've been taught out of it. Even children who, like, if are left intact, that's what I call children who don't have dysfunction. They still need the reassurance from an external, you know, from the parent, say, I believe in you, I trust you. We all need that and we have to test it out and find out where, okay, if I do this, that happens. If I do this, that happens. But I can always trust myself right now. So let's say I made a decision and it was a crappy decision. You know, life shit hit the fan because it was a horrible decision. That doesn't mean I can't trust myself, which is where a lot of people go, oh, I can't trust myself. No, now the shit hits the fan. Now you can trust yourself in this moment to navigate the experience of the shit hitting the fan. Because it's not about, I can trust all of my decisions because I have dysfunction. I'm not going to make the best decisions all the time. But I can trust myself to navigate anything. Because if I'm here now, I've survived everything. so I can continue to survive that. And trusting yourself makes you a lot less manipulable, a lot less. You begin to truly feel, not just think, but to feel for yourself what's right and what's wrong for you. And you instantly stop being concerned about what's right or wrong for other people. Because you realize that that's going to steal your energy. It's just like, okay, what's right for me? And same when I'm working with my kids. It's like, well, I'll tell them what I might do or what I had done in the past. And then I leave that up to them to make their own decisions. And if they fall on their face, I don't go, oh, you shouldn't have fallen on their face. I'm like, hey, get up. It's okay. Let's go.
Yeah.
What do I do now?
Yeah. So where does responsibility, accepting responsibility, I don't like the term taking responsibility. I think accepting responsibility, like where does that fit in?
Okay, I like this word. So my definition of true responsibility is no blame, shame, or guilt in any direction. Not towards myself, not towards somebody else. Another way I look at this is like, I take full responsibility for my life. That means my experiences, how I interpret you or somebody else, like my own, my projections. I take full responsibility for the things that happen to me in my life, but I never, ever, ever, ever take responsibility for someone else's behavior. I can't, but we are taught to do that a lot. Especially as children, if there's dysfunction in the house, we will automatically take responsibility for the well-being of the parental unit. And so we go through life taking responsibility for other people's emotions, the way other people treat us. We'll be like, oh, it's my fault that they're an asshole. No, sweetheart, they're an asshole. Has nothing to do with you. That's their behavior. That's not yours to take on. You know, how you feel about them being an asshole, that's yours. That's something you can do. That's something you can navigate, right? But you can't navigate their behavior because that's theirs. Right. And that's a big one. It's like if I take full responsibility for my experience, I'm way more empowered in my own life, but I'm not going to take responsibility for my children's behavior or my husband's behavior or my neighbor's behavior or anybody's behavior. I can't. I would love to because that's part of my dysfunction as well. It's like, oh, well, I'm responsible for everything happening in the universe, which is debilitating. That could cause all kinds of, misalignments with ourselves, because it just we don't feel whole anymore when we're trying to take on everybody else's stuff. And being responsible done the right way feels really good. Responsibility never feels heavy.
Tell me what that means. Taking responsibility, being responsible the right way.
So let me think of I want to find an example with the kids, because this is always an interesting, it's always an interesting thing. Here's the thing. When we recognize that taking responsibility doesn't make me guilty, I have a lot more freedom.
Yes.
Okay. A lot more freedom. Because that's, if I have been given the story or the idea that if I say I did it, I have a story for me, that I'm guilty and now I need to be punished.
Yeah.
It's really hard to take responsibility.
Yes.
And for me, taking responsibility means doing what's right, even if it doesn't feel comfortable. So there was one time we went camping, huge families, a huge group of people, and coffee hot off the campfire. And I poured the coffee and I set it in front of this man, and he had his little baby girl in his lap, and she pulled the coffee onto her and burned her entire torso. And he stands up and he's screaming, and there's a whole lot of panic and whatever. He's like, "Who the fuck did that?" And I just stood there and I was like, it was me. I put the coffee there on the table. I take full responsibility for this. And then I cleaned up my collateral. I did everything I could, made sure that she gets to the hospital, supported as much as I could along the way, and came back. Now, you could totally go into it's his fault too. She was sitting in his lap. He should have been aware, blah, 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 all of that. But I knew that I had set the coffee there. I was the one that put the coffee on the table. It's my responsibility. I take full responsibility for that. I don't feel guilty about it. I mean, I do not wish that on anybody. That's awful. But it was me, and I can stand in that fire and burn in that fire. And the really interesting thing was he was so angry, which clearly I could understand. But as soon as I said it was me, he relaxed. And he let me help him. And it was like in that honesty, we could see each other really clearly as humans.
Yes.
There was no way I put that cup there on purpose, and no way that I meant anybody any harm.
Yes.
But had I gone into, we all know what it could have turned into had I gone into a defensive stance or not taken responsibility.
Absolutely.
And same things happens with the kids, and anything that happens. Like for example, I remember many times I'll get on one kid, like, "Why did you do this? You put the fork in the blah, blah, blah." And another kid will be like, "Actually, that was me." And I'm like, so there's my child standing up and taking responsibility. Actually, it wasn't her, it was me. And I'm like, oh man. And so I turn to the child who I was mistaken for, and I say, "I'm so sorry." That's another example of like full responsibility in every direction. It's like, I made assumptions, and I'm sorry that I thought it was you. And then I can turn to the one I said, "Thank you for telling me." And then nobody's in trouble. Or how many times I'll be like, "Who ate the last whatever?" Right? In this like kind of angry thing. And whoever did said it was me. And I'm like,
diffuses it.
It totally does.
Doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah. And without the guilt.
No.
I think the guilt is the piece that pollutes it all,
Well, it's interesting.
Makes it noisy.
One of the biggest pieces I work with people on is I call it eradicating blame, shame, and guilt, because these are actually the tools that are used as an emotion. Guilt and shame are actually really amazing internal correction mechanisms, if you will. If I make full contact with my shame, like I've done something, I fell down the stairs and my butt's hanging out, I don't know, whatever it is that happens that feels shameful, the shame will tell me, "It's okay. You didn't do anything wrong. Shit happens." If I make full contact with it. And also when I do that, and same thing with guilt, will be like, "It's okay. Everybody makes mistakes." Like if you make full contact with it, instead of if you try to push guilt away, it grows. Same thing with shame. It grows and grows and grows into like this huge thing. And when we make full contact with those things, we realize it's not as bad as we thought it was. Plus, we begin to make very different decisions. So my kids have learned by trial and error, like every human does, that if I'm not going to do something by myself in a dark room where nobody knows about it, if I don't want people to find out about it. This is how I stay out of the guilt trap.
Yeah.
Right? I just don't do things that I don't want anybody to know about. That doesn't mean I don't have privacy. Like I'm not about to but it just means that if somebody found this out, I would stand up and say, I did this. This is me. This was my decision. I stand behind myself.
That's living fully responsible.
Right. I have my back. Now, because shame and guilt feel so shitty, and we've turned it into a mental mechanism that we use to manipulate, bully, control each other.
Yes.
And when we start to unravel that in ourselves, like nobody can shame me. That you go ahead. You could try as many ways as you want. You can't shame me because I feel my shame. That's my first thing. Yeah. And I don't feel bad for anything that I've done.
Yes.
So you can't shame me. You can't then manipulate me to do something. You can't make me feel guilty because that makes no sense to me anymore. Right? And of course you can blame me and I will listen, but I won't just take on that. I will first ask myself, Shanti, is this your responsibility? What is your side in it? And I will own my side, but I will not for 1 second, own somebody else's. And that can cause some friction while we're figuring things out.
Yes.
And that's okay.
Yes. So we spoke earlier before the live, we spoke about discernment and boundaries. Do you want to touch on that at all? I think
it goes with responsibility very well, right? Because it is, and so many people think like boundaries is a bad word. But a girlfriend of mine, her name is Monica Day, she said something and it hit it so perfect. She said, boundaries are nourishment. Right? So they're not these walls to like keep people out. They're not these, it's not a defense mechanism. It's my boundaries. And if we're not used to setting boundaries, when we start to set boundaries, we will feel really wobbly, almost like a hangover, like, oh my gosh, right? Because it's so foreign. But the more you set them, you begin to feel like there's a quietness that overtakes, a peacefulness that takes over your life, because it's like, I have created the space where I'm nurtured the most. That's what boundaries do. It keeps me in my own well-being and it keeps me in my own responsibility. I get a lot of people who will come and be like, yeah, but so-and-so is not respecting my boundaries. And here's the thing. Nobody else has to. Nobody else has to respect your boundaries. You have to. And sometimes that means like drastic things, like if you're in a relationship and somebody doesn't respect, it might mean leaving the relationship. And that's a lot of responsibility for most of us. We're not used to like.
I heard you say something once. You said your behavior speaks louder than your humanity right now.
Mm-hmm. That was a big lesson for me in my life. Was I've always seen the shine in everybody, the potential. When I meet a human being, I'm like, oh my God, because I could see like what's the possibility there. And then I would be confused because their behavior didn't match the shine. I was like, what? And so I got confused. I lost my responsibility and my boundaries because I was trying to see the shine behind the behavior. And when I learned to listen to the behavior louder than the humanity is when I learned everything I needed to know about boundaries. The behavior comes first. Doesn't mean, I also like to say, my love is unconditional, my presence is not. So I can love the shine and the potential and the beautiful human being behind it and get the hell away from the behavior. Like as far away as I can get. So I think that's
quite a statement. My love is unconditional, my presence is not.
Yeah.
That's the establishment of boundaries. But it's interesting. I think once we shed, certainly I spent a great deal of my life handling shame, regret,
Yep.
Not just second guessing. If you can quadruple guess,
right.
That would be me, right? And when you shed those layers and you start to realize that when you just own your experience.
Exactly. All the good, the bad, the ugly. There's always a point where I'm working with somebody and they're like, oh, I'm an asshole. Like, oh my God, you don't understand all the shitty things I've done. And I said, well, welcome to your reckoning. This is the reckoning, right? You enter the room and it's a phase everybody has to go through where you see all the ugly, warty things you didn't want to see. It's basically the fall of what some people, I don't prefer this word, but some people call the ego. And in my experience, the ego is simply that thing that was created to shield us from knowing everything we need to know about ourselves, including the good, but also like the ugly stuff. Like we don't want to admit that we've been an asshole to ourselves. We don't want to admit, and the ego's like, no, you're great. You don't need to see this stuff. But inside, that there's a part of you that has to face yourself fully.
Yes.
And I call that the reckoning. And it's always, for me, a really beautiful phase where you're like, and if you step into the room of reckoning without the blame, shame, and guilt, you can be like, okay, I was a very horrible mother. All right. Okay. And then what do I do now? How do I move forward? Accept this about me, even love this part about me, because wasn't something I was doing with intention. And even if I was intentionally vindictive or whatever, I can love myself through that. But if I plaster blame, shame, and guilt on it, I will stay in the reckoning, which is hell on earth.
Yeah.
Like, this is where a lot of people, I'll stay in the reckoning of just looking at how disgusting I am, and I will live that. But if I can come into the reckoning and allow the grief, that's the first emotion that will come. It's going to be a shit ton of grief, because grief is the emotion of cleansing. When we cry, we actually clean our lungs. So every emotion has a physical component that when we allow it to move through us, it heals us. So grief, crying, being sad, allows us to clear out the lungs. There's scientific, like, all these things with the emotions are magic. So grief is one of the deepest things we feel that cleanses everything out.
Now, let me ask you this. There are going to be people that are watching this that they're going to totally relate to everything that you're saying. They're going to be. Now, do they just do this? I mean, how do you go about doing this work yourself, or do you need a facilitator?
I like this question. So I have hundreds of people who watch just my free content on Facebook. There's 600 hours of videos on Facebook, maybe more even at this point, who don't have a facilitator, who are doing this work on their own. So I'm 100%, and I get messages weekly. Hey, I've been doing this, what you said, and their lives are changing just by using what's out there for free. So that's the truth. The truth is, of course, you can do this on your own. Yeah. Of course you can. And I'm here if you want to go deeper and you want to be held while you do that. That's all. By somebody who does this every day. Like, this is what I teach, I live.
Well, in my experience, I did a lot of work on my own. But when I started to work with faciltators, the process just went so much faster.
Exactly.
And then I was like, this would have been great years ago, right?
Right. But I also think that you have to come to a point where you're ready to be facilitated.
Yes, that's very true.
You're ready to be in a co-creation space. Working with me is not relying on me.
Yeah.
Working with me is not Shanti's on a pedestal and I'm over here. It's a equals meeting equals, and we're in this together. And it can be uncomfortable. It can be really uncomfortable when we go from not knowing how to take responsibility to taking full responsibility. Yeah. And that's what I do. I hold that while you take responsibility, and you wobble to and fro. And every time my client wobbles, it's me who goes, it's okay. You got this. I believe in you. You're not alone. And that goes really, and plus I understand, like, I can explain to them the step where they are and where they're headed.
Because there was something that you said, this goes back a few weeks. You said, I have no right to ask my client to look at aspects of themselves that I haven't looked at.
Right.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Right.
There's no, like, let's say if somebody came to me and they're like, I want to date. I don't know that I'm really the right person for that because that's not an aspect of myself that I've explored. I mean, I've been with my husband for 20 years. Dating was never my thing. Like, it was an instant relationship basically my whole life. So that would be somewhere, for example, that I would feel like I have a girlfriend who does that and she's great and I'd love you to meet her. And like I will move these people to somebody else. But when it comes to emotions, there's nowhere I won't walk with you.
Yes. Yes. I remember the first time that I heard about your vomit sessions.
Yeah.
I think if it was possible, that it was love at first vomit.
Yeah.
when I first heard that, I was like, like I got you just in that session that you offer. I got it. And I'm just like, I think that, even something like that,
I think vomit sessions are so important. I didn't I can't even describe how important they are, because what it is like, I'll get a partner, like, you know, two people are married, and I'll get one side of the marriage, and they're able to say the things you would never want to say to your spouse, to anybody, but they're inside of you. So it feels like you're congested with this gunk that needs to come out and be held in like an unconditional container, because once it's out, you realize, A, that's not me. B, that's not the other person. Right? Okay, now I've gotten this adolescent dysfunction. I've gotten it out and nobody's been hurt. And then I can come to I always say, you have to walk through judgment to get to discernment, to get to your boundaries. But we have been taught not to judge. And the judgments are, he's an asshole and he sucks and he shouldn't do this and they're like this and her hair's so stupid. You know, like the judgments of you, but you have to be able to walk through the judgments to get to the discernment in order to figure out what your boundaries are. And so once you can spit it out, it takes 1-2 vomit sessions for people to realize, oh, that's what it looks like. So I can now sit by myself and listen to my judgments and kind of giggle at myself for being so judgmental and so gossipy and so whatever. And it takes 3 minutes to go through the judgment, to get to discernment, to get to boundary, to get to my well-being, to be able to communicate. Right? But at first we're so ashamed of our judgment because that's what we've been taught. And judgment is just covering up what we're feeling.
Yeah.
Right? So instead of feeling it, we're going to use these words and this bravado and this judgment. Judgy.
I see this. Recently I was, you know, I work with people and as well. And it's just interesting that I watch this person dance on. But the judgment is so profound for this person that it's inhibiting. As soon as she blows through that, as soon as she's willing to just blah.
Yep, exactly.
You know, and just and let it go, because you know what the truth is? Every one of us had to go through that to have a significant breakthrough.
Absolutely. And so I like make friends with my judgment. You know, like who the fuck do they think they are? And as soon as I hear myself say that, I realize that I feel attacked. Oh, there's the feeling. I feel small. I feel, I don't feel this stuff. This feels gross. This feels icky. And so when I say, who the fuck do they think they are? That's my recognition that there's an emotion here that feels weak, that needs me to be very clear and conscious with it. So the judgments are important. They're a level of emotionality. It's like the socially approved way that we're allowed to express our emotions, even though it's disgusting. But it's socially approved. To be judgmental, people, right? Like, it's okay if somebody says, you're just so judgmental, most of them will be like, okay, whatever. But if somebody says, you're so depressed, it's way worse, right? To point towards the emotion than it is to point at like, oh, you're just being judgmental.
The behavior. Interesting. That's very interesting. Very astute there in your assessment. That's really good. Very profound. I think that, you know, taking that on the world stage, because we are talking about bringing light and love, not just to the person that needs it right now, but let's face it, to our world, right? And I think that the more people own their emotions, the less they carry judgments.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
And
because you can't. The deeper you're connected to yourself, the less it becomes impossible for you to intentionally or even unintentionally hurt someone else. Your language changes, your interaction with people changes, because you don't react, you respond. A totally different world. That's two different realities. When you're reacting or when you're responding. I am at a point for me myself where I would say 90% of the time I'm responding, because I've learned that reacting doesn't feel good ever. It doesn't. It basically, it means I have a lot more collateral to clean up. If I react from inside a trigger, I have a lot more cleanup to do.
Yes.
Right? And so I'd rather sit in here, clean it up, and respond.
Yes.
Than have to but it happens. Like, I'm human and I have triggers just like everybody else. And there's times I'm in a trigger and I see it, and that's almost worse than when you don't know about it. You know, it's like, oh my God, stop. And you can't.
Oh, I don't know. Sometimes I laugh at myself mid-trigger. Literally.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, there's many times I would be yelling at my kids as I was growing, and I'd be like, Rara, why am I yelling at you? I didn't even know what was happening.
Priceless. Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. Now, you have 4 children?
Yes.
And they range from 8 to 17?
Yep.
And you have boys and girls?
Yep. The boys are on the ins, 8 and 17. The girls are 12 and 15.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you were at UCLA, and you were heading into being a medical doctor,
right?
When you met your husband.
Yes.
So you were born in the U.S., but now you are a Swiss citizen, and you and Casper, your husband's name is Casper, you live in Switzerland with your 4 children, and there's never a dull moment. I definitely get that your life is very engaged. I don't want to say exciting. I just want to say engaged. It's fully engaged.
Yes.
I admire that. I think that a lot of people kind of live, their lives feel kind of gray. Do you know what I'm saying?
I call it sepia.
Oh.
It's not quite colorless, but it's not technicolor yet.
Yes. Yeah. Very good.
I live there. So I understand that space very well.
Yeah. And I think what I'd like is, I'm hoping that someone that watches this, if it's just one person that makes the decision to become fully engaged in their own life and own their emotions.
Yeah. It was like, emotions are like the flavor. They make everything pop. Right? So I did go through an experience. My husband calls it the year that nobody was here. So, and
I'm waiting.
It was like, afterwards I found out, because I didn't know anything spirituality wise about this would call, but it was basically what a lot of people are trying to reach, this enlightened state, this bliss state, this state of, I don't know what the hell. I was just kind of like, for my own experience, it was like I was 2 eyeballs and there was like a little tiny dangly body hanging off the bottom. And there was like really it was a great space, but it was completely the same, if I can say that. There were no fluctuations, right? It was literally like a baby, I think, but I was still able to function, obviously. And, but I didn't have opinions. I didn't really care. I was kind of like, very much like a child, without the emotions. So it was like this state of like a consistent state of being, right? And you could have literally pushed me off a cliff and I would have just been like, like it was just no investment, no attachments, no anything. And I now know that that's what a lot of people think, where they want to go to. They want to transcend the human experience. They have this idea of enlightenment, of some kind of, I don't know, utopic state. Then I had the grace, I don't know, and none of it was done, but it was what I call the re-entry. So coming back into being an embodied, like actually having a body again, and not just being these 2 eyeballs experiencing life. And that the re-entry required me to enter the emotional field of being. It was a requirement. Like, you can't be embodied. The body is the conduit for emotions. So you can't be in your body and not have the emotional experience. And what that did was it went from that was awe and wonder, which is still here, by the way. It didn't go away. That experience has not left me.
Yeah.
And it's still available to everybody, even embodied. Like, I think this false idea that we need to get to just one state of being, or there's a utopic thing. It doesn't exist. And I came back and life literally popped into Technicolor. So it was like everything, every experience became more than that. And that was a recognition that emotions are what allow us to know that we are alive, that we exist as a human being. Without them, this static state of being isn't really anything worth experiencing for a long period of time, because that's all you are.
Yeah.
Right. I wouldn't say boring. It's not that, but it's just.
But I also think that that I think when I grew up in a place that being that way on a human level was kind of what you aspired to, right? Yeah. You know what I mean? And all it meant was constantly suppressing how you felt, constantly suppressing, like
hypervigilantly containing yourself.
Yeah, so and you become so focused in and managing this unnatural unexpression.
Yeah, if that's where you're at, then you're constantly also, it's exhausting because you're constantly watching other people's expressions.
Yes.
You feel always under attack. You're very, right? This thing. So if anyone right now, I think the thing that I would say is, however you're feeling, whatever you're feeling, it's okay. I'm not saying it's great. And like, you know, it's joyful, but like, if you're depressed, if you feel alone, if you feel sad, if you're feeling dejected, all of those feelings, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with you because you're having a negative spectrum emotion, right? In my world, no emotion is negative. That doesn't exist. There's just what there is.
Yes, because emotions are authentic. They're yours.
Yep.
You know,
and they can't be. So there's also a thought process that thoughts create feelings. That's not my experience. So this is also goes against a lot of what people believe. So thoughts can help to create a story that creates an emotional response.
Okay.
So for example, the political climate in the States, it doesn't feel very comfortable, right? And so that story can really create feelings of being alone and being in darkness. That's a story that can create feelings, right? That can create this sense. It goes like this, that when thought creates a feeling, it goes into the body this way. It's very, right? But that's a story. It's not a pure emotional feeling. Because if you take the story off, it just disappears, right? So that's the story that caps the emotional feeling. If you take the story off, the feeling moves and it's not stuck. You're not stuck anywhere. Emotions move this way, up out of the body. That's a pure emotional feeling. It will never, and it comes before I can even think. It bubbles up before I even know what it is. And in a intact emotional system that's working right or properly and clearly, emotion rises and the mind meets it, and they meet in the middle. And the mind is the translator that comes out of my mouth. I'm sad. Even though I'm sad doesn't do justice to what I feel. It cannot possibly touch the tenderness and the nuances of what sad is, what sad I'm feeling right now. Because whatever sad I'm feeling right now is not what I felt yesterday, and it's not what I'm going to feel tomorrow. This is a new sad. But I'm sad is the translation. That would be the pure translation. The other one would be like, so-and-so did this and that. That's the intellect now trying to take control of the emotional experience. But when we invite the intellect into the emotional experience, it's simply, I'm sad. And communication becomes very easy.
What do you recommend that people do? Most people probably have emotions that to some degree have been stifled. That,
one of the biggest fears that we have is that we're going to our emotions onto other people, which is, of course, we all know instinctually that that's not what we're meant to do with them. They're ours, right?
Right.
So I often invite people to sit in a chair, to not move, and to just sit there and feel. And for some people, this is going to be really hard, just to sit down and be like, I'm going to feel what's here right now. And I'm going to not listen to the shit in my head that tells me this is stupid, this is a waste of time, all of that. I'm just going to sit here and allow the feel. Instead of this to happen where I'm dampening myself down, I'm going to let it rise out of me and just see what happens. And so long as I'm sitting in a chair, nobody can get hurt. I can't hurt myself. I can't hurt somebody else. There's no reaction. I begin to experience what responsiveness means. Emotions are a response to life. They're not a reaction to life. And you get more and more clear too, like, oh, this person is using this tone of voice because they would like me to react in a certain way, but I don't want to. I'm responding instead. You get back your power of like decision making.
Yes.
Of like, I can see that like somebody else can be angry in my face. And I'm like, oh, this is interesting. I'm not having to react to it. Right. I'm able to just be present. And if I'm not present, I'm like, I'm out. I'm leaving. This is not healthy for me. Like nobody should stay in anything that's uncomfortable except their emotions. This is the thing, right? Like not with another person, but when you're alone, that's the other thing we're taught that is a huge disservice, that we're not supposed to feel uncomfortable. Discomfort is a part of our response. It doesn't feel good when people yell at each other. That's natural. We need to be okay with, I don't feel good when people yell at each other. Now, it's okay that people yell at each other because they do. That's reality. And it's okay that I don't feel good about it. Right? But what I've stopped doing is making judgments about people yelling. And I just stay in my response of it. This is my response. Like, of course, like, this doesn't feel good. It's not supposed to feel good. And the more comfortable I get with discomfort, the easier my life is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't fight it, which means discomfort will move through. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't stick to me like something. It's not a hook in my skin. It's like, oh, I'm uncomfortable right now. It doesn't mean I'm going to be uncomfortable for years to come or years in the back. That's where anxiety comes from. Anxiety comes from thinking I'm going to feel like I do right now, which can be like really intense forever. Instead of like, I'm going to sit in the chair right now. I feel an anxiety attack coming. I'm going to sit in this chair and I'm not going to move until it passes. Even if that means 3 hours, although I've never experienced that or had clients experience it. Presence to your emotional experience, for me, I've never experienced being longer than 20 minutes before it moves on its own.
Before it moves. Mm-hmm. Okay, now you said your clients, and I think that I highly recommend that people work with a facilitator, or they better have a friend who's
can hold that space.
Enlightened enough to hold that space. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? I think sometimes the people that bury emotions, it is hard for them to reach out and quote, ask for help. But I think it's what you're providing is assistance. Right. You know?
Exactly. Well, I can't help. Here's the really cool part. Like, all I can do is let them know that the biggest thing is like, it's okay how you feel. Like, nothing you feel is wrong. And you're not alone in that. Like, everybody, regardless of who they are.
Including you. Like, I've survived it. Like,
exactly. Yeah. Feel it. And I can't sit in the chair and feel your feelings for you.
Right.
That's not possible. Like, that's absolutely not possible. It's about taking responsibility for your own experience and knowing that if I need somebody to lean on, I have them. Like my private clients, we have private sessions like this on Zoom, and then I'm fully available to them in between sessions via email or chat for when life really happens. And they're like, oh my God. And it just to be able to be like, okay, you're on the right track. Even when it feels like you're not, you're totally on the right track to being clear for yourself.
Yeah.
And for me personally, I find it invaluable to have somebody like this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But I always tell people, I will never lie to you. Like, can you do this work on your own? Yes, you can. Absolutely.
Just that most people won't. That's the thing that I find.
Well, it's so uncomfortable. It is at the beginning. Even one of the biggest emotions that people struggle to feel and be okay with is joy.
Interesting.
Like unbridled joy. For no reason. That it just bubbles up and it's like, oh my God, it's so big. Right? So people think, oh no, it's hard to feel rage or it's hard to feel. No. The negative emotions, we're actually, we toggle in those more than the positive. Right? And so, and when you can move through the negative, like you do the positive, so, oh, joy, oh, sadness, oh, joy. And it's like, because that's really what it is. It's popcorn. Emotions are like popcorn. It moves, right? And the more it moves, the more energy you have. And so you can go through something really tragic and still more than function in your life because you're just constantly go through feeling it. Like I went from having to sit in a chair to do the work to being able to be cooking and doing whatever, driving and doing the work as it's happening. So because this is the most natural thing for us. Emotions are our most natural way of expressing, responding, being in the world. There's nothing wrong with them, but they do provide sovereignty. And that is, I think, why they've been vilified so deeply in so many different aspects.
It's a new day. I think a lot of people value sovereignty today in a way that maybe they haven't in past generations.
And so many people feel like I'm the only one that feels this way. That I think I hear all the time. You're not alone in how you feel. You're not alone in like what you want in your life. You're not alone in wanting different or better. And here's the other thing. We want to be better, not because we're bad. We're not, there's nothing inherently wrong with us. Like if we just sat on the couch from today on and never did anything, we're fine. But the desire to be better is our natural evolution of our consciousness. So that's normal to want more than what we have, but not like this isn't enough. It's just, I want to keep growing. I want to keep expanding. I want to keep knowing myself. This is very, very natural. And I think people don't understand that. Like, it's not about the things I get. It's about increasing the quality of my own consciousness. of my own experience of myself. And I want people to know that they matter, that their emotions matter, that how they feel matter, that if they've been told they're too sensitive, they're too much, they're too loud, they're too dramatic, they're too whatever twos that they have been told. People are probably right. You are probably too much for them, but you're not too much at all.
Very good. So do you strictly work one-on-one with your clients, or do you offer group experiences as well?
I do offer, I don't have anything right now that's on the table, but I do offer groups, and we'll be doing that in 2018 as well. Most likely the direction I'll be going is parenting, but my parenting courses are for anyone who's ever been a child. So it's not what it sounds like, right? It's for anyone who's ever been a child. And it's about, there's a lot of talk in the world right now about the inner child. And this is super vitally important, to meet your inner child. But who do you meet the inner child with? You meet your inner child with the parent you always needed. The parent that is you, the parent that you've always wanted to be, the parent that you always wanted and needed and longed for as a child. That's where you meet the inner child. So you not only need to be connected to the inner child and do what I call picking up the pieces, which is where you pick up those pieces where the dysfunction was so bad that you disassociated from yourself, and bring that in. But you can only do that. Like, I'm super loving and kind. I have a very strong mother energetic on every dimensional level. But even if I talk to your inner child very sweetly and kindly, it will still kind of just peek out from behind you at me. But when you turn to your inner child and do the same, it believes you. So it needs you to be the parent that you always needed. And that's really where I'm going with this. I feel like that whether you're a parent or not, it benefits the world that you become whole. You become the child and the parent in one.
We will have a link for people to be able to get in touch with you. We're going to put it in the comments section. Yeah, we could keep talking.
We could.
For sure. This was really great. I mean, just some really, really great nuggets. Emotions are magic. Eradicating blame, shame, and guilt. Boundaries are nourishment.
Yep, I love that one.
My love is unconditional. My presence is not. Very, very good stuff, Shanti. Really. Thank you so much for being a part. I hope that who's ever listening, that they will reach out to you. And I mean, truly, in my experience, having someone, a facilitator, someone to be accountable to. People call them coaches, they call them mentors. I mean, terms are just used. Right. I mean, you need a friend in the journey. Right. It's because of, a true friend will allow you to be a friend to yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you for having me. It's been amazing.
It was really great. It was really great. So we're going to sign off for now.
It's still recording on my side.
Let's see.
The live